UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education, and I will be moderating this webinar. In today's agenda, we'll start with some opening remarks from Francesc Pedró, Director of UNESCO IESALC. This will lead us to the presentation of the Higher Education Policy Observatory, providing a deeper look into the platform through a short demo of its main features. In a second stage, we'll embark in a reflective conversation on the value of international data for higher education policymaking with two distinguished policymakers from Europe and the United States, who we are honored to have with us today. We will finish the conversation with a Q&A session. You are welcome to send your questions by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. If your question is addressed to a particular panelist, please indicate which panelist the question is for. Finally, we will conclude the webinar by briefly presenting IESALC's additional initiatives around higher education policy that are part of the Policy Hub program. Without further ado, let's start with the opening remarks from IESALC Director, Dr. Francesc Pedró, who has recorded his welcoming words in a video.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues and friends from UNESCO around the globe. It is with profound enthusiasm and a deep sense of responsibility that I stand before you today as we unveil a pioneering initiative of our UNESCO Institute for Higher Education, the launch of the Global Observatory for Higher Education Policies. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you today. As you can hear probably from the background, I'm at the airport between flights. I'm so sorry not to be able to join you today. But let me say that this observatory is for us the first of its kind in the world, designed to serve as a lighthouse, illuminating the diverse landscapes of higher education systems across our planet. In today's interconnected world, the value of higher education as a catalyst for social change and economic prosperity cannot be overstated. Similarly, the claims that we make that higher education institutions can really promote sustainability all over the world can certainly be sustained through joint and cooperative work. Yet, until now, there has been a significant gap in our ability to compare, analyze, and thereby enhance the policies that govern these vital institutions. This Global Observatory for Higher Education Policies is set to change that narrative. Crafted with the insight of our analysts, but also the contributions of policymakers and researchers from various corners of the world, this observatory is not just a repository of data, it is a dynamic tool that provides comparative analysis of higher education policies and practices. By fostering greater transparency and offering data-driven insights, it aims to assist policymakers and educational leaders in making informed decisions that are culturally relevant and internationally cognizant. Our observatory will enable countries to learn from each other, to adopt best practices, to avoid past pitfalls, and to innovate together towards common goals, as, for instance, sustainability. It will empower researchers to scrutinize trends, to examine the efficacy of different educational models, and to explore the multifaceted impacts of existing policies. For the first time, this level of comparative data is accessible at your fingertips, offering a panoramic view of global higher education in unprecedented detail. Therefore, today marks not just the launch of a tool, but the beginning of a new era in how we approach education policy globally in higher education. As we move forward, let us embrace the spirit of collaboration that this observatory embodies. Let us use the insights gained through this platform to dismantle barriers to education, to enhance quality, inclusion, and accessibility, and to foster innovation that will benefit all of humanity. I invite each one of you to explore the observatory, to utilize its resources, and to contribute to its growth. Together, we can ensure that higher education across the globe is more equitable, more effective, and more aligned with the evolving needs of our societies. Thank you for your attention, your commitment, and your passion for education. And sorry for the background noise, which reminds us that our clients, children now, youth in the future, and adults always, will be the goal of whatever we do at UNESCO. Let us step forward into this new chapter with resolve and anticipation for the achievements that lie ahead. And let me finally congratulate the team at the UNESCO Institute for Higher Education that has made today's launch and the whole observatory a reality. Thank you all.
Thank you, Francesc. Now let me turn to Matthias Buchert, Policy Analyst at UNESCO IESALC, who will present the Higher Education Policy Observatory.
Thank you very much, Kelly, and welcome everyone. We're very excited to have you with us today. I will take a few minutes to introduce the Higher Education Policy Observatory. This platform was initially released a few months ago, yet it is fundamentally, we believe, a living object for two main reasons. First, we are regularly updating it to add new features or to improve existing ones. And second, because we regularly also introduce new data and new countries on the platform. We update the information included in the observatory because of its very nature, as it's legal and policy information that evolves over time. But first, you might ask, what is the rationale behind this initiative? Well, as Francesc Pedró highlighted in his welcoming remarks, we realized that there was a need, and there is still a need, for more evidence, including comparative evidence on higher education. Such evidence can play a crucial role in guiding policymaking around higher education to foster mutual understanding between systems and to promote international collaboration in the higher education sector. This is why we decided to build an international database providing baseline information on higher education systems and policies globally through a set of systematized and comparative indicators. In this platform, we also intend soon to integrate the main statistics on higher education that is collected internationally by the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, and we are collaborating with colleagues for that, from that institute for that purpose. Our goal is to allow anyone to easily and freely access this information, as well as to compare countries to visualize global trends, and we hope soon to explore possible relationship between different indicators on higher education. And this is basically the summary of the process that we followed to build this tool. So as the first phase was about design and definition of indicators, these had to be constructed based on their relevance for policymaking in higher education, but also on their comparability across countries. We also had to draw some selection criteria with regard to countries, because as much as we wanted this platform to be global, we are like any other organization operating in a resource-constrained environment. And we just opted for selection criteria based on country's size and also on national language. The second phase of this process was about collecting all the primary data to populate the observatory. All this data was collected from official sources. The third phase consisted in retrieving all the legal and policy documents that backs this information, again, official documents all the time, that to provide information, the background information behind the information in the observatory. The objective was to store them on the platform, to secure stable links, and to allow users to find more information about the higher education systems and policies if they want to. The fourth phase of the development of the observatory was the phase of validation of the information collected. For that, we partnered with UNESCO field offices worldwide, as well as colleagues from UNESCO headquarters, to reach out to relevant governmental authorities in every country represented in the observatory. This allowed us to validate the information for multiple countries, and we are still liaising with countries for which the validation is still pending. And the fifth phase was technical. It was the development of the platform with its different features. This is also still ongoing as we are adding new features regularly. And finally, the next phases, the future phases, will be about updating the policy observatory. For that, we plan, as we said before, to integrate statistics on higher education worldwide, to also add new countries to the Higher Education Policy Observatory, and also to update existing information. So the results of this process is a global platform providing comparative information on higher education systems and policies that are built around 8 categories, such as key legislations around higher education, quality assurance, social justice, or also the recognition of foreign qualifications. And these 8 categories comprise around 45 indicators that are relying on a set of 150 variables. This represents over 22,000 data points, and the observatory covers, for the moment, 146 countries worldwide. The observatory has 3 main options for the visualization of data. First, country profiles that allow to explore detailed information on single countries. There is also the option to look at global overviews to see how different indicators are distributed around the world. And finally, there is a possibility to compare up to 3 countries and see whether they converge or they diverge on the different dimensions included in the Higher Education Policy Observatory. And this is to give you a broad idea of the substance of the platform and the indicators covered. I won't go through all, as you can explore it directly on the portal, but indicators relate to a wide range of dimensions, from key legislations around higher education, with, for example, whether legal frameworks around the world recognize institutional autonomy or academic freedom, to social justice, with indicators on the gratuity of higher education or governmental programs to provide scholarships to certain population groups to support access to higher education. What's important to note, just going back to the previous slide, on that is that all indicators are based on systems legislation, and the portal provides the name of the corresponding law as well as the link for the users to be able to access it. So now, without further delay, let us play a short demo video to dive a little bit more into the features of the Higher Education Policy Observatory.
Welcome to the Higher Education Policy Observatory. This video will demonstrate the key features of the observatory through the perspectives of policymakers and researchers to help you see how you can locate information, compare countries, and see global trends. First, let's have a look at the observatory's features. The observatory holds data on around 150 countries, with plans to continue to add more countries in the near future. There are 8 categories central to higher education policy, comprising 45 indicators based on 150 variables. This draws on data from over 22,000 single data points. There are 3 ways you can view the information in the observatory. Select a specific indicator and look at how it behaves globally as well as across world regions and income groups. Look at country profiles displaying the information for individual countries on all indicators in contrast to the situation of its own region and income group, or compare all indicators for up to 3 countries at one time. These features make the observatory a practical tool for looking at higher education policies in your own country, identifying other countries with policies of interest, comparing your country to others facing similar questions about their higher education systems, and identifying ways you can collaborate with other countries. Now I'll show you some of these features in detail. The first perspective we will take is as a policymaker from Finland, trying to determine the scope for their country's next higher education plan. You can look at your own country's profile and evaluate each indicator by first selecting your country from the menu or from the map and clicking View. Scroll down to view all indicators by selecting their categories. The view of each indicator lets you compare where the country stands in comparison to the rest of the world, its region, or its income group. You can click on the Explanation button to learn more about how the indicator is defined in the observatory. Most indicators are associated with specific legislations, policies, and plans. These legal sources are referenced and made accessible directly in the database. Since all sources were collected from publicly available information, viewing your country may allow you to see gaps where legislation is not made available to the public. As a national policymaker, you may choose to make a note to make that legislation accessible to increase the transparency of your system. Are there special countries you want to compare yourself to when it comes to policy? This can be done in the country comparison page, which allows you to view up to 3 countries at a time. Say that as a policymaker from Finland, you want to compare your own policies to policies in two neighboring countries, Sweden and Estonia. You can select these countries from the menu and click Add Country, or select countries from the map. You will be able to view all indicators side by side. The colored boxes can quickly signal to you where countries are similar or different. If looking for specific legislation, it will be listed, and the legislation stored directly on the observatory website for stability will be hyperlinked. Now let's imagine you are a researcher looking at higher education indicators at a global level. For example, the right to higher education. You can select the indicator from the menu, and the values for all countries in the observatory will be displayed in the map, along with a pie chart and bar chart underneath, providing more details by world regions and income groups. If you would like to learn more, you can use the individual country profiles and country comparisons to read the specifics. Let's say you are curious to read into the policies indicating that higher education is a right in Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. Again, select these countries from the menu and click Add Country, or select countries from the map. Click Compare Countries and scroll down to the category Key Principles for Access to Higher Education to find the indicator for the right to higher education, and you can see that there are links to legislation. The article or section in the legislation specifying the right to higher education is listed next to the name of the legislation. You can take your research further by exploring other indicators which may explain how the right to higher education is implemented, such as whether the law in a country requires higher education to be free, or if there are national scholarship programs for students. Now that you are familiar with the Higher Education Policy Observatory's online platform and main features, we hope you enjoy using it for policy and research purposes. If you have any questions on this initiative or would like to collaborate with us, for example, for the integration of additional countries in the observatory, feel free to contact us through the contact details provided in the About tab of the platform. All right, we hope you enjoyed this presentation and the first contact with the Higher Education Policy Observatory. You can now access the platform using the QR code, which we have on the screen, or click on the link shared in the chat so that you can experience its different features and start browsing the wealth of information that it contains. To reflect on this presentation and how these initiatives can benefit policy making in higher education, we will now have a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Victoria Galán-Muros, Chief of Research and Analysis at UNESCO IESALC. We are delighted to welcome two distinguished panelists to join the discussion. Chiara Finocchietti, Director of the Information Center on Academic Mobility and Equivalence in Italy, and President of the ENIC-NARIC networks covering 55 countries in Europe, and Rajeev Darolia, Chief Economist in the United States Department of Education. Please remember that you can ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will only be able to consider questions sent through that option for the Q&A session. Please don't forget to mention the name of the panelist you are addressing the question to. Victoria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Thanks, everyone. Just giving a few seconds so the three of us can be on the screen. Good afternoon in Italy, Chiara, and good morning in Washington, D.C., Raj. Can you both hear me and see me? Yes, I see you now here, Raj. Can we bring also Chiara to the screen? That'd be great if we're all here. Thanks. I need to start by really thanking you in advance for your time. And it's a pleasure to have you both here because we've done all this effort of building this observatory and this hub that you will hear about later to serve you, policymakers, and we want to make sure this is something useful. We're always open to a dialogue with you about how can this be even more useful for you and how can we better connect and have a dialogue about higher education policy. I would like to ask a question, I guess, for the two of you, because in your experience as policymakers, would like to think that you make decisions based on data, that you have data to, first you have data to make decisions on, then you make use of these data. Usually that's nationally, maybe that's international. Would like to hear a bit more of how often do you rely on data, including the international one, to inform your decision making? And also, which type of data do you use? And when using it, what are the benefits that you would expect? But also, what are the challenges that you have faced until now? We can start with you, Raj.
Thanks, Victoria, and congratulations to the whole team for this great undertaking and really bringing this resource to light. I think it's fantastic. So, as was mentioned, I'm the chief economist at the U.S. Department of Education. For us, the use of data and evidence is really central. This office is only about 3 years old, and it was created with the explicit goal of making sure that evidence and data was really used to inform policy decisions. So my office tries to use analytics and data to support policy development. We consider ourselves sort of a conduit with the research community, who often has access to other types of data. And then we actually try to develop some data products ourselves, trying to take advantage of the great data that is kind of held within the department in order to inform the public and help researchers on the outside also work on this. So we use a number of different types of data in our day-to-day to inform policymaking. Much of what we do is internal to the government. So we have access to data basically on every student who participates in our federal financial aid systems. In the US, that's about 3/4 of students who touch the public federal aid student of any sort. So we have a great deal of data on those students themselves. We also depend on data that's provided to us from institutions here in the US and especially also abroad that a number of domestic students attend. And then our government also does a number of nationally representative student level surveys. So those are all data sources that we use. What I think is important is that we not just present the facts in a completely neutral way, but one of the things that we try to do is then apply our expertise to be able to interpret things in a way that really informs policymaking. So our office brings on a number of professors and researchers from external contexts, and we kind of combine that expertise with the expertise that's already held within the department. The other piece that we try to do is we really try to stay on top of research and data that's being produced by researchers, again, in the academy, by the government agencies abroad as well. So, I think there's a great deal of potential for use of international data and better understanding of international context. A lot of what we try to do is help decision makers understand, what works, and when we're trying to employ something that is a new policy or a new thing, at least for the U.S. We often look to other contexts, and that might be a subnational context, that might be an international context. And so the availability of understanding what has happened by peers around the world, I think, is an incredibly important advancement. So I'll stop there for now.
Thanks very much, Raj, because it's obvious that the US has outstanding data, but I guess this is not enough. You also have outstanding people who value data for policy decision making, who know how to work with data, and most importantly, are not always present to translate this into policy insights or policy recommendations. So I'd like to hear a little bit from Chiara about this. She works in an international environment as well, so she has a national position in Italy, but also an international one in Europe. And I would like to hear from you, what type of data do you use? How do you use it? How often? And what are the main benefits and challenges?
Thanks, Victoria. So I would say, first of all, that we rely on data as far as possible. So we would like to rely always on data and on quality and transparent data. In our job, our work is to support international student mobility of graduates. And for this reason, access to reliable, accurate, transparent, and up-to-date information on higher education system and on qualification is key, and is the basis of our informed decision-making, to have a fair assessment of qualification. And I will underline that this is quite clear also if we read to all the UNESCO regional convention and to the global convention. If we see in all this convention text, there is a clear reference to the importance of relevant information to make an informed and reliable assessment. So we are very glad, and I mean, we very much welcome initiatives such as the one that we are presenting today, because organizations like UNESCO can play a very important role in facilitating access to information, but also to facilitate this international comparison. And I mean, it's also important to see how this work is implemented and monitored. And for this reason, it's also important to monitor then how these decisions are implemented. For instance, also for the regional convention, I'm thinking to the Lisbon Recognition Convention, that it is the convention in Europe, there is a monitoring mechanism. And lastly, if I have to highlight a challenge, is sometimes, I mean, we work with data, as I said, on international student mobility, and also with data on requests for recognition and assessment. Sometimes these data are a little bit scattered, because we have different competent authorities that do collect this data, and it's not always easy to collect, to have access, and to compare this data. So this is one of the challenges we face. And I will stop here for the moment and give back the floor to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Chiara, for sharing your experience as well. I mean, European countries generally, and with the support as well, and the coordination sometimes of the European Commission, it's, you know, the region as a region of the world that has some of the best data as well. So we, UNESCO, that work at a global level, we are very much aware that today with the two of you and with this Europe and North America, we are dealing with the global region that has better data, but as I said, also people that value it and use it for decision making. Thanks very much for mentioning the regional conventions and the global conventions of UNESCO. It's always nice if other people bring them in. And also we, I guess, at UNESCO try to facilitate the access to comparative higher education information at an international level. Interesting that you said scattered data, because that has also been our problem internally when trying to find the information for the observatory, that it was not always obvious where that information was. And Chiara, let's stay with you, because I want to know that given your experience as a president of ENIC-NARIC, I'd like to see what type of opportunities for international collaboration could be facilitated by international comparative data, and more concretely, a platform like the observatory. Which form could this take, and which benefits and also challenges you could foresee?
Thanks. So I see three main opportunities here. So the first one is, I mean, you said this already twice, I mean, it is to build awareness about the importance of data and of data-driven decision. So it is very important to have tools like this that help to build knowledge around some key higher education parameters. And I would say also to make this information accessible and easy to be understood. And if I may say, the visualization, for instance, is a powerful tool. So I think it's very nice and very interesting what you did in this tool, because you have this easy way to visualize information. And we know that sometimes a simple image, a simple visualization can be very powerful. The second opportunity, and is an opportunity both, I will say, for research, but also for policy making probably, and for, let's say, build further on our work, is the possibility, or at least contribution, to build a common language. We know that on a global scale, it's very difficult to, let's say, sometimes understand each other, because maybe we can use the same word, but with a different meaning. So it's very important, the work you are doing, to build this kind of, let's say, if we want to say like meta framework, or simply to build a common lexicon in the higher education sector, and to have comparable data. I mean, set of standards that have the same meaning in different countries. And finally, the third opportunity, and I think this is very interesting, and this helps also to connect different sectors, is the possibility to cross-reference different set of data. I think this is very important. To make a concrete example, in the tool, there is the possibility to see the countries that signed and ratified different regional convention and the global convention. So this is a very interesting data. And also I look forward to the integration with the UNESCO, with the data from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics. So then we can cross-reference this data with the data on mobility of students to see to what extent there is if there is correlation and if there is what it is. For instance, there is another interesting work that UNESCO have been doing on the right to higher education. For instance, this data are also very interesting on this. So I see this as the three, at least from my perspective, the three immediate opportunity to work on and to look forward starting from this tool.
Excellent, Chiara. Thanks very much. I guess we always hear things that maybe we can expect, but others that we don't. So when you're building something and then people tell you, how do we use it? Or how this could benefit my work, it's always nice if they come up with ideas or with situations that you haven't even foresee yourself. So you've mentioned the awareness of the importance of data. And I guess one of our mandates as UNESCO is advocacy. So if only we can get that message across, that's already a lot. And more data visualization of higher education statistics. So UNESCO is coming, including the student mobility ones that you were mentioning. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And the common language. I guess if we want to improve something internationally, we need to start calling it in the same way and defining it in the same way. So agree with the importance of that. The cross-reference of different set of data is something we are looking forward to exploit it even more in the next few months. And so thanks again for those insights. And with that, I go back to Raj, and we want to go even forward. So we've been speaking about collaboration, but we would like to think that collaboration could be the beginning to address global challenges in higher education, such as fostering quality, access, inclusion. And we'd like to hear from your perspective, how can a shared platform like this contribute or support the bigger and greater efforts of addressing global challenges in higher education?
Thanks. So I'd like to echo some of what was said by my esteemed panelists, is that data-driven decisions are incredibly important, but they're difficult to do for a lot of people, right? So a lot of people tend to think about data or analytics, and they can get scared off by some of the advanced math or just seeing a lot of numbers on the page. And so I do think presenting things in an accessible and straightforward way is incredibly important for kind of democratizing or making more universal the use of data. So I think the observatory does a really great job of making sure that things are presented in a way that is kind of accessible to a lot of different people. If we're thinking about collaboration, comparability is key, and it's a common lexicon, a common language, but also just making sure that we kind of start at a point where we understand at least some level of background, at least some level of context, and that across different contexts. There's different terminology, there's different political structures, there's a lot different higher education, financing schemes, cultural norms, those sorts of things. And so the more we can do to reduce the cost at the front end of having to learn those about each other and kind of start a little bit down the path towards progress, I think is incredibly important. I'll give an example of something that I think a lot about here in this role, which is about thinking about value in higher education. So if we think about something like value, I think this is a nice lens through which we can think about quality, we can think about access, we can think about inclusion, because we want students to have access to higher education, but we want students to have access to high value institutions. We want students to feel included, but we want them to be included, again, in places where they're likely to find value. So value can mean different things to different people, and it has a lot of different inputs, right? So it includes benefits of going to college. This includes direct financial labor market benefits, but also non-financial benefits. It includes the cost of going to college, so that's what we might think of as direct tuition and fees, but also opportunity costs. That incorporates things like public financial support, which is something, a key policy lever that I think a lot about. And then also things like risk of these investments as well. And so if we're going to have a conversation and collaborate on how we can increase value across different contexts, we need to be able to have some common language, some understanding of our different contexts, and to be able to have these conversations. So again, I'm just excited about a tool like this, which at least gets us, somewhat down that path to start to have a common conversation on some of these topics like value in higher education. Mobility was also mentioned as well.
Thanks very much, Raj, because we've spoken internally that we've created a tool that we would have liked to have. So first and foremost is helping us to do our work as higher education analysts at an international level. And of course, the intention is to reduce, that transactional cost, this cost of just getting to know how the countries are doing, try to find their legislation, try to see how they call this thing that you call something else. And if we can save that time and that effort to and those resources to different higher education policymakers around the world, I think we are already helping somehow. The conversation around value in higher education that involve all those concepts, quality, access, inclusion, it's a critical one, and it will probably even be more important in the future, considering the current circumstances. So hopefully peer learning at international level could also help on this. And I would like to go back to Chiara just to have a final questions on my side, and then we'll open to questions from the audience. And we always like to look at the future. As much as the future today is uncertain, there's a few potential scenarios, all of them uncertain. And considering the current situation, we'd like to hear from actually both of you, starting with Chiara. What do you think are the most important next steps for the future of higher education policy development internationally? And also, what would be needed to uncover this new frontier?
Thanks, Victoria. Maybe, I don't know if this is the most important, but for sure one, let's say, topic that stands in front of us is the topic of artificial intelligence. And of course, this will be something that we should deal with. But sometimes when we speak about artificial intelligence, and especially artificial intelligence in education, that is even more sensitive, if we can say like this, we speak very much about technology. And sometimes we forget that beyond technology, to work, artificial intelligence need data, need a lot of data, consistent data, comparable, etc. So I think that this is something very important, let's say, for the future of higher education, to understand, especially from, let's say, public organization, public authorities, to understand the value of data, of having this data, of collecting them, of making them available, to make the best use of them, and also to make the use of them at the service of our citizens and our societies, and of course of our students at the end of the day, and of our higher education and education system. So that would be from my side.
Thank you, Chiara, for putting that on the table, because it seems that AI is the cool thing and data is the boring thing, and the not so cool and not so sexy thing. But hey, in order to have proper AI, we need to have proper data, and a lot of it to back that up. So thanks for that point. Same question to you, Raj. What would be those next steps for policy making?
Yeah, I have two. The first one is just increased evaluation of programs. And so again, when we're trying to think about collaboration or advancement, often we want to know what works and what has worked in other contexts. And so, I would love to see sort of broader repositories that include not just information in different contexts, but sort of an in-depth analysis, to the extent that can be done at scale, of what was effective, what made things effective, what made things not effective, What was specific about that context that may have been unique? You know, a lot of this is contained in academic research literature and research literature, but that's not accessible to everybody. And so a way to kind of bring that forward and in a way that's maybe more broadly accessible, more summative, that people can make conclusions from quickly. And so some sort of kind of repository of evaluation programs or some sort of development of that, I think, would be really helpful for them kind of moving forward with policy development. The second piece is related to even more data collection, but I think as like the higher education marketplace also becomes more global, we need to have a better understanding of outcomes of students as they cross borders, whether that's for their educational experiences, and into the labor market. Right now, there's very little data that will track students and workers sort of internationally, whether that's their educational experiences, their labor market outcomes, the benefits and costs of their education. So I would also love to see some advancement there, where we're able to kind of understand the experiences of students who cross borders as well.
Thank you, Raj. And there are and will be more and more students crossing border for different reasons, from the best reasons and also for the worst ones. And I guess it's very important, as you said, to understand all sort of situations, to see how can we integrate those people into higher education systems of different countries, knowing where they come from and what could be the best policy to make them part of our system. And then maybe afterwards they ended up in another country looking for a job. So they will also need to understand the higher education system that they've been in. So yeah, in a globalized world, I guess there's no question that this would be really, really helpful. I'm opening this up for questions of the audience, and I have my colleagues here have pre-selected some for me. And I would like to maybe now, Raj, that you're there. There is one that is targeted to you, and it's on this line. So it says that usually a lot of countries look at the US for higher education policy making, and I guess, and this is my own point, also for all the policy making in other areas. But we were wondering whether you have looked at other countries or other examples or other policies as as inspiration or as a reference to design your own policies in the US.
Yeah, it's a great question. The short answer is yes, and I think this has really evolved over time. I'll give an example of a major policy, at least in the higher ed finance space in this country, that was really influenced by an international context. So in the US, student loans or student financing credit for attending higher education has become much more popular, and it's become one of the sort of biggest policy issues here in the US. There's been a shift of student loan repayment plans to income-based repayment, and this is effectively where someone's payment will go up and down depending on how their income fluctuates as well. This can be really helpful for a lot of different reasons: to guard against downside risk, to match payments to ability to repay as somebody kind of progresses through their career, but it's not necessarily for everyone. And one of the major policy initiatives in higher education for this administration was actually kind of the introduction of a revised or new income-based repayment plan. And this kind of developed out of a, income-based repayment plans have been around in the US for a long time, but a lot of the sort of policy parameters that I think were considered and thought about in the public debate here really came from other contexts. So Australia, United Kingdom, both have income-based repayment plans that were studied extensively by researchers here. New Zealand, Thailand, a number of other countries as well, which were, frankly, more advanced on these types of plans, and they did then influence, understanding what worked in those contexts, what was considered, major policy development here. So, certainly the U.S. Can do a better job, looking externally than sometimes it does. But that's an example of something that was a major initiative in this administration that was really influenced heavily by what was happening globally.
Thank you, Raj, and I'm very glad to hear, because you know, if the US is looking at all the countries to create their own higher education policy making, there's probably not an excuse for any other country not to do exactly the same. So thanks so much for that example, particularly such an important one as the one you've mentioned related with the student finances. Chiara, I would like to address a question to you here. I will rephrase this one as well. And it is related to the fact that you, as ENIC-NARIC, are a network of regional offices, of country offices in Europe, a European network that does a lot of collaboration and contributes a lot to the higher education within Europe. But you are also working in a higher education area, like a European higher education area, so a common one, which is unique as well in the world. So my question to you is, do you think it is feasible to have something similar to what you have in Europe, not having a common higher education area like most regions or other regions in the world don't have? Or would that be essential?
Well, that's a difficult question. Well, I would say I will frame like this, that our field, our specific field, so recognition of qualification, was seen as a precondition to support student mobility, and as such as a precondition of effective, let's say, policy implementation regarding and program regarding student mobility. This is in the European context. So the idea of removing obstacles, for instance, to recognition, was seen as a key precondition to foster student mobility in Europe. That is exactly one of the key element of the European higher education area. The European higher education area has three key pillars, and one is exactly let's say, to support recognition of qualification to easy mobility of students, together with quality and quality assurance, and with the qualification framework. And actually the discussion about qualification framework was exactly to build a kind of common system of equivalent degrees, as it was written in the first document in the Bologna Declaration, but also in the Magna Carta, that is a kind of cultural basis of the Bologna process that was signed by almost 400 rectors and head of universities. So if this is feasible and what are the conditions, I would say there are other regions actually that are looking into this, other regions of the world. Let's say it's difficult to find a cause effect or a push and pull mechanism here, but I think the two goes very, very much hand in hand. I mean, on one side to support comparison, dialogue, harmonization of higher education system, and so let's say the policy level mechanism, and on the other side to have concrete tools that can make this policy level vision working in practice. So maybe this would be my answer. We can, yes.
Again, there you go. I muted myself. Thank you, Chiara, for that reflection. As well, as part of the regional convention, some sort of networks are trying to be built in other regions as well, starting by information networks only, and contact point and focal points in different countries. It is a starting point. It is early days, but hopefully in a few years, and learning from the great practices of ENIC-NARIC, all the regions will be able to also develop something similar, even when they wouldn't have such a mature and common system as the Europe has. But thank you for that reflection. We actually had all the questions that are related to the observatory that I could just answer fairly quick. So I have here, hold on, there are many questions. Could we have an expert group of users to guide the development of indicators? Yes, please. Any help is welcome. And we are a small team. We're trying to do a lot of work. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. So let me confirm and say again our good disposition and openness for collaboration with policymakers and higher education researchers and experts, users around the world. Could we explore connections with levels of innovation and entrepreneurship? Yes. So once we are bringing data, we are bringing higher education data that we know, but also what we consider to be associated data. So probably levels of innovation, even entrepreneurship, are data that could be interesting to also bring on board. We do have a question as well about integrating subnational data. And here the answer is we have been working at national level, resources and time, money. That has been our first step. We would love to also have data at subnational level, particularly from some countries that are in which they share competencies, and sometimes they share a lot of competencies to subnational level. The case of the US, for example, in which if you search different indicators, it often appears as this is a competence of the subnational government. So we are, again, repeat the message, always open to consider ways in which we can collaborate to develop the observatory further, whether this is adding new countries or it is going to subnational level as well. This is a quick question to both of you, and we would like to know which KPIs or areas of higher education do you think would be more useful for you to have international evidence of? I guess we're just thinking about, okay, we're going to be adding some potentially new indicators in the future, which we can add many of them, and we can go in all sort of directions. But we would like to hear from you what would be useful for you as international evidence. And of course, if anyone that is attending the webinar also want to put in the chat what would be interesting areas of indicators for you to continue developing the observatory. The more evidence and opinions that we have, the better. Chiara, I will start with you.
Yes. I can start. So one KPI I think I already referred to. So it's regarding it. I mean, it's all the parameters regarding student mobility. So international student mobility. This will be very interesting for us. We know that these data are available, and this will be very interesting to have them handy. Another data, for instance, that could be interesting for us, it's in general terms access to higher education. And for instance, in this sense, the Policy Observatory could be very interesting to cross-reference and to connect different data. For instance, data on refugees and on recognition of refugees qualification, for instance. This could be another, and on access of refugees to higher education. So this could be two indicators that could be very interesting to have. I saw in one of the messages in the chat there were also reference to verification tools to verify authenticity of qualification. So this would be wonderful, of course, if this is available, but here that's a point of if and to what extent these data are available. I can say that, for instance, for the ENIC-NARIC network, we do have a reference in our country profile to verification sources. So I mean, in some cases, probably the Policy Observatory can also be this kind of meta framework. So not duplicating information, but just also pointing to where information is. So, and I will stop here.
Thank you. Those are great ideas. Definitely the student mobility, also the refugees and those forcibly displaced, but also that thing that you pointed out to be this meta framework, and try to also bring other information that might be in other sources together. So it's sort of a one-stop shop. Great, Chiara. Thanks very much. Rush.
So, one of the big things that I would like to see, and I think this is really hard to do, also has to do with mobility, but it's more in reference to economic mobility. So thinking about who has access from which types of socioeconomic backgrounds, and then, what are the potential benefits. So economic mobility, kind of post-secondary education to post-secondary education, who's able to take advantage of it, who's able to gain, the biggest benefits from higher education systems. That's obviously a difficult thing to do, but I think there's been some efforts to try to measure economic mobility with more precision, and I think that would be great to think about that across international contexts as well. The other piece that I think would be, valuable, at least from my perspective, is just that the kind of the overlap between what we might think of as like post-secondary education or higher education systems with labor market training and sort of vocational skills training, I think is really starting to blur, at least here in the US, and I know in at least a handful of other countries. So kind of understanding how governments and countries kind of view their labor market training, vocational skills, context relative to higher ed and post-secondary ed, I think would also be valuable, just because some countries view this as completely separate, some countries view them as completely integrated, and I do think that affects policy making depending on how that's viewed as well.
Definitely. So thanks very much for pointing in those two directions, the economic mobility in one side and also TVET, which it's also related to economic mobility in some ways. They are challenging, as you've said, they are challenging to measure, and that will require, to like new data and people sitting together and see how can we conceptualize that. But if there is someone that I would like to have at that table, if we're doing this exercise, it would be you. So make sure that if we go in that direction, then you'll be hearing from us. And I am checking time, and I really always try to stick with the time that we have said. We could be speaking about this for way longer. But let me just give you a very quick overview before we close the meeting on. We've talked until now and a lot about the observatory, but this is in the framework of an initiative that is called the Policy Hub, that is all directed or targeting policymakers. So hopefully you'll find this useful. I'm going to go around the clock quite quickly, but know that all these you have it online. Let's start with the Higher Education Policy Data Portal. So this is something that we're going to be doing in the next few months. We're going to be adding indicators of the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, as I mentioned before, related to higher education, but also to associated indicators. We will integrate data visualization tools as well to display both observatory and UIS indicators. Another initiative is the Higher Education Policy Forum. This is a meeting that public opened of higher education policymakers, but also other stakeholders to discuss emerging topics in higher education policy. We just had the first one this year. That was in the context of the regional UNESCO Higher Education Conference in Latin America and the Caribbean. So this was the 15th of March in Brasilia. We had 2 panels, 8 panelists, 8 high-level policymakers of this region. We talk about quality, we talk about funding, we talk about sustainability. So we expect this is only the first one of a set of meetings that we will be doing every year from now on. The next one is the Policy Network. This is also for policymaker, but the difference to the other one is this is private, this is closed, they are informal meetings, and to discuss also emerging topic, but in a more confidential way. We had the first meeting as well in Brasilia in March. We've launched officially the one for Latin America and the Caribbean. We expect at the end of this year to launch in a different region and hopefully of the world, and continue like this for the next year. So people and policymakers start meeting sort of regularly every 3 or 4 months, just to have regular catch-ups. More policy briefs. Well, these are just concise publications with analysis, examples, recommendations to policymakers about the current challenges of higher education. What else do we have? We have policy insights. Those are quite short documents, and currently they're mostly based on the data of the observatory. We've published already 7. There's another 7 that will come this year, and they will be sharing right now in the chat the link in which you can access them. We also have a couple of more initiatives. We have the policy news. We we're planning to try to keep track on what's going on policy reforms in different parts, in different countries, different parts of the world, and to have people updated about what's going on, but always counting on the collaboration of policymakers or other stakeholders that want to let us know, hey, this is happening in this country, as we have 196, and it becomes sometimes quite difficult to actually know what's going on everywhere. Last but not least, higher education policy talks. We are currently identifying interviewees, selecting and recording the first talks with policymakers. If you are a policymaker interested in participating, just let us know. We just have informal podcasts about higher education topics. And that's it from us. You'll have the link to the hub and each of those initiatives being shared by my colleagues in the chat. And with this, I would like to close. I'll ask if everyone can be brought to the screen, the panelists, but also Matthias and Kelly. I would like to thank the two panelists again for sharing with us your ideas, your insights in such a generous way. Thank you, team, not just for the presentation today, but for all the work that has been put behind to do the observatory. We take, hopefully, I do take a lot of food for thought, definitely for us at Higher Education Analyst. Listening to policymakers is always interesting. From outside, we will continue improving the observatory and the whole policy hub. It's not perfect, it's earlier stages, but hopefully you can see the value of it as a starting point. Let us know any way we can collaborate, whether this is validating country information, which is this is adding countries, which this is adding indicators. Always happy to collaborate. Our emails will be shared also in the chat. So Chiara, Raj, team, colleagues from headquarters, and also to the audience, the current one and also the future one that will be watching us later. Thank you. Thanks very much. And we will keep in touch. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all for this very insightful discussion. So as Victoria mentioned, the webinar is coming to an end. The presentations and the recording of the webinar will be made available to all of you. And remember that you can access the online platform of the Higher Education Policy Observatory through the link provided in the chat and on our website. Thank you very much for attending and participating in this regional launch of the Higher Education Policy Observatory, especially to our esteemed panelists. We hope you enjoy using the observatory. Please feel free to share questions or further feedback via email or via the feedback form, which is on the observatory website. We wish you all a very good day or evening or night, depending on where you are located, and we hope that we will see you again at another one of our events soon.